All right, we're back in session. Sheriff, bring the jury back in, please. We're back in session. The jurors are again present. Call your next witness, please.
All right, this time the state would call Timothy Suggs to the stand.
All right, come up, be sworn, please. So put your left hand on the Bible, raise your right hand, please.
You solemnly swear this man to give this court will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Thank you.
All right, you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Sir, would you state your name, please?
Timothy Suggs.
And Mr. Suggs, how are you employed?
I'm employed as a forensic scientist manager of the Trace Evidence section of the North Carolina State Crime Laboratory.
And can you describe for the jury, if you would, what your duties and responsibilities are as the manager of the Trace Evidence section of North Carolina State Lab?
I manage the day-to-day operations of the Trace Evidence section as far as handling evidence assignments and personnel matters and things of that nature. In addition to my management duties, I also perform casework, analyze items of evidence involving fire debris in which I'm looking for the presence of ignitable liquids or accelerants. I also perform an analysis in explosives cases in which we're looking for the presence of a low explosive material. Along with that, I also perform unknown examinations in which we're looking at items just to determine what kind of substance may be present.
And can you describe for the jury, if you would, your background and training that allows you to perform those functions at the State Crime Lab?
I have a Bachelor of Science in Chemistry and Physics from Appalachian State University. I completed basic law enforcement training as well as the SBI Special Agent Academy. After completion of all of that, I spent my first 3.5 years at the crime laboratory in the drug chemistry section in which I examined for the presence of controlled substances. Prior to beginning those types of examinations, I completed the in-house training program to identify the presence of controlled substances. After those 3.5 years, I transferred to the trace evidence section where I trained in fire debris examinations to examine for the presence of accelerants. I completed that in-house training program and then also completed the in-house training program for explosives examinations. I've completed a couple of seminars and workshops, one by the FBI in post-blast examinations as well as ATF. I've examined over 5,000 cases looking for controlled substances, 2,000 cases for ignitable liquids or accelerants, and about 30 cases for explosives. I've testified as an expert witness over 50 times.
And on those occasions where you were testifying as an expert witness, would that be in the area of forensic chemistry?
Correct.
You know, at this time, the state would tender Agent Suggs to the court as an expert in forensic chemistry.
There being no objection, the court accepts the tender.
Agent Suggs, you had indicated that at least part of your duties with the State Crime Lab involved examining items and comparing unknown items to known items.
Correct.
And how does that typically happen? How does that type of case is presented to you or come into your lab?
Cases are collected or samples are collected from a crime scene. They're submitted to the laboratory through the evidence control unit. When they're submitted, there's a request for examination form that's filled out in which the officers indicate the type of examination that they would like to have performed on those types of evidence. When we're looking at an unknown case, we actually need a sample for comparison in order for us to work up testing on the known sample and then compare it to the unknown sample to see if they react the same.
And with regard to this particular case involving Amanda Hayes and the victim being Laura Ackerson, did you receive certain items to compare and analyze?
Yes, ma'am.
And can you describe what you received and when you received it?
I received a soil sample from a hog pen. It's laboratory item number 32, which was agency item number 72. I received another soil sample from a hog pen that was laboratory item number 33, which was agency item number 73. I received a third soil sample from a hog pen, which was agency item 74, laboratory item number 34. Then 4 soil samples in black cloth, which was agency item number 70, laboratory item number 35. And lastly, a 1-gallon container of muriatic acid, which was agency item 1, laboratory item number 36. These items were submitted into the laboratory by E.G. Gibney on April 4th of 2013. I received these items of evidence on April 5th, 2013 from evidence technician Sarah Clay.
So when, in general, when cases come into the lab, the law enforcement agent submits it to your evidence control technician?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct, and they retain custody of it or place it in the vault until it is transferred to one of the scientists for examination.
So on the date that you actually received these items that you've described, they were submitted to you for what kind of analysis?
These items were submitted to me to determine whether or not acid was present.
And you had identified these various items, and you said that they were agency item numbers and then law enforcement item numbers. Every item that comes into the lab, do you basically assign your own number to those items, or is it assigned by the state crime lab?
That is correct. When the items are submitted into the laboratory, each item is submitted with a unique laboratory case number, and then there are unique item numbers that go along with that laboratory case number in order for us to be able to identify those items of evidence.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
Agent Suggs, I am approaching and handing you what has previously been introduced into evidence as State's Exhibit A-237, State's Exhibit A-238, State's Exhibit A-239, and State's Exhibit A-240. Do you recognize those items?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
And they have previously been identified as soil samples that were taken from a hog pen that was located in Richmond, Texas. Are you able to tell that those were the exact items that you received for analysis?
Yes, ma'am, I can. They bear the unique laboratory barcode as well as the date that I received the items of evidence, my initial, and then also on the seals, my initials and date on which I sealed the items of evidence.
May I approach the witness again?
All right.
Agent Suggs, I have here what's previously been introduced into evidence, State's Exhibit A-242. Do you recognize that item?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
And is that the muriatic acid that you received in the lab?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
Agent Suggs, after you received State's Exhibits 237, 238, 239, 240, as well as State's Exhibit 242, can you describe to the jury the process that you went through to examine those items and make comparisons and render any opinions?
Certainly. All these items of evidence, the first thing I did was to determine whether or not these items had a pH value. What pH is it's a scale that's used to determine how acidic or basic a sample is. With the pH scale, it runs from 0 to 14, where your acidic samples are on the lower end of the pH scale, so around 0, 2, or 4. Water has a pH of 7, which is neutral, and then you have basic samples which run on the upper end of the pH scale with a pH of around 14. A base is something such as sodium hydroxide or lye, something of that nature. After determining whether or not the samples were acidic or basic, or whether or not they indicated a pH at all, then I went on to do some color testing to determine what might be contributing, whether or not the sample or contributing for the pH. I used 3 different color testing. One's a diphenylamine color test that reacts with the presence of nitrates and other oxidizing compounds. This color test would indicate if I had an acid whether or not nitric acid may be present, because nitric acid contains a nitrate. I also used a silver nitrate color test to determine whether or not there was presence of chloride. Hydrochloric acid contains a chloride compound, so if I had a reaction with that, it would indicate the presence of hydrochloric acid. I also used a barium chloride color test, which would indicate whether or not the presence of a sulfate was present, which if I had an acid and it reacted with that would indicate the presence of sulfuric acid, because sulfuric acid has sulfates. After determining this testing, then I went on to perform an elemental examination, or an elemental examination was performed by one of the scientists in the laboratory on several of the items to confirm the presence of chlorine in a couple of those samples.
And in going through your analysis and completing those tests that you've described, the pH test as well as the color test and the final test for the nitrates that you went through, what did you find? What were the results of your examination?
Examination of laboratory items number 32, 33, and 34, which would be State's Exhibits A237, A238, and A239 failed to indicate the presence of an acid. Examination of laboratory item number 35, which is State's Exhibit A240, when I opened that sample, there were actually 4 different soil samples in there, as well as a sample of black colored cloth. When I examined that, 2 of those soil samples indicated the presence of a strongly acidic, or indicated that they were strongly acidic, and those 2 soil samples also contained chloride, and this is consistent with the presence of hydrochloric acid. Examination of laboratory item number 36, and I don't recall State's exhibit number on that right now, revealed the presence of a strong acid containing chloride, and this liquid is consistent with hydrochloric acid.
State's Exhibit 242 is the bottle which was labeled muriatic acid. Is that the last item that you were referring to?
Yes, ma'am. That's item number 36.
Okay. And when you use the term hydrochloric acid, is that consistent with muriatic acid?
Correct. Muriatic acid is a trade name for hydrochloric acid.
And so you had received a number of samples, soil samples, A237, 238, 239, which I think previously had been identified as control samples, and you did not detect any acid in those samples.
Correct.
And then with regard to State's Exhibit 240 A through E, which apparently there were five samples in that. You've described one as containing like a cloth-like material. Was one also appear to be a rock or something of that nature?
In the item of evidence, jar 1 contained a plastic-type material, jar 2 was soil, jar 3 contained leaves, vegetation, and cloth, jar 4 was a rock, and jar 5 contained soil that I labeled during my examination.
May I approach the witness?
All right.
I have removed the 5 sample containers and placed 2 in front of you, which are marked as States Exhibit A240B and A240E. Do you see those items?
Yes, ma'am.
And are those the 2 items that you sampled that revealed the presence of hydrochloric acid?
Yes, ma'am. Those are the ones that reveal the presence that the soil was strongly acidic and contained chloride, which is consistent with the presence of hydrochloric acid.
And with regard to the appearance of those, the soil sample with regard to what was contained in States Exhibit A240B and E, did that appear to be a darker sample than what was contained in A237, 238, 239, or the control samples?
Referring back to my notes, the soil contained in jars 2 and 5, again, States Exhibit 240B and 240E, were darker in appearance than the soil that were contained in items number 32, 33, and 34, or States Exhibit A237, A238, and 239.
And in conducting your examination, did you, were you able to detect by smell the presence of acid? Or was that one of the factors that went into your analysis?
I didn't denote at the time of my examination any odor on those items of evidence.
And were you able to render an opinion as to whether or not the liquid contained in States Exhibit A242, which has been identified as the muriatic acid, whether or not that was the same substance that was found in the soil samples in States Exhibit A240B and E?
Both samples were strongly acidic, or a strong acid, and they both contained chloride. In both cases, this would be consistent with the presence of hydrochloric acid or consistent with hydrochloric acid. I can't say whether or not what is in the bottle is exactly the same as what was collected from the soil, but the examination of the 2 items are consistent with each other.
Thank you, that's all I have.
Questions?
No question.
Thank you, sir. Call your next witness.
At this time, the state would call Brian Davis.
Okay. All right, thanks. Mr. Davis, if you could sworn, please.
I do.
You may proceed.
Thank you. Sir, would you state your name, please?
Brian Davis
And how are you employed?
with the Houston Police Department.
And how long have you been employed with the Houston Police Department?
18 years.
And you also work as part of the Houston Police Department dive team?
Yes, ma'am.
And is that, how long have you been a member of that team?
Approximately 12 and a half, 13 years.
And with regard to the duties and responsibilities of the dive team, what types of cases are you involved in as a member of the dive team?
We assist homicide, sources, whether it be a lake, a bayou.
And how many members are there of that dive team?
There's 3 full-time members and there are 14 part-time members.
And are you one of the part-time members of the Houston dive team?
Yes, ma'am.
With regard to your training, what kind of training do you have specifically with regard to diving?
I'm a certified public safety diver, as well as I hold a dive master certification through PADI. The school's put on through the police department, and we have to obtain our dive certification prior to attending that school.
And in terms of, you indicated that you work to help recover evidence from a body of water, or potential evidence from a body of water. Do you work in conjunction with just the Houston Police Department, or do you assist other agencies?
No, no, man. We're designated the Southeast Regional Dive Team for Southeast United States. With that certification, we're expected and asked to assist smaller municipalities on a regular basis.
And so your area of responsibility includes a geographic area?
Yes, ma'am.
And what is that geographic?
Generally from the Louisiana-Texas border to the Mexico border. So the Gulf Coast of Texas, and we do go as far north as Austin.
Were you aware, or did you become aware that in July 2011 that the Houston Dive Team was requested to assist the Fort Bend County Sheriff's Office with an investigation?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you in fact respond as a member of that dive team on July the 25th of 2011?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
What was the body of water that you responded to?
Oyster Creek.
And about how far was that from Houston? Is that 45 minutes to an hour?
Yes, ma'am. It's 45 minutes from our dive office, 45 minutes to an hour from there.
And what information did you have, by the dive team, information did you all have regarding what the request was with regard to this particular search?
One of our full-time members, who was a coordinator, he'd been contacted by Fort Bend, requested him make the scene and assist with a dive search of Oyster Creek. We were told that we were looking for a woman's body, more specifically a foot, hands, smaller objects.
And at that point, were you aware that certain remains have been recovered the day before?
Yes, ma'am.
You indicated you were specifically requested to look for some smaller hands and feet. Why was that?
To assist with identification.
And to your knowledge, at that point, had the woman's head been recovered?
No, ma'am.
And were there any distinguishing marks that you were given with regard to her feet? Any reason that you were looking for her feet?
Yes, ma'am. We were told that she had a tattoo on her foot, and that would help with identification.
With regard to that section of Oyster Creek, the jury's seen some photographs, but can you describe what you observed and how that was relevant with regard to the type of search that you were and the methods that you were being used?
We employed 2 searches on that day. The first one was actually a dive where we go on air and dive below the water. That search was, other than it just being hot, it was a normal search. The second search, we moved to another area, and that search was not done underneath the water. It was done on top of the water, searching through lilies. We had, there was a small opening where water could get through, but just about the entire creek was covered with lilies.
And with regard to the lilies or vegetation that was on top of the water, did that have a root system that extended down?
Yes, ma'am, it did.
And did it go all the way down to the bottom of the creek?
No, ma'am. It suspended about 6 to 7 inches below the top of the water.
How deep was the water in the area that you searched?
It would go from 7 to 8.5 feet. It ranged, but it was anywhere between 6.5 to 7.5 feet.
And in terms of
And we search anything that's on the bottom. Pick it up, look at it, if it matches what we're looking for, then we'll recover it.
During that first search where you were basically down on the bottom, did you or any of the other divers recover anything?
No, ma'am.
With regard to
2 hours until before we found something.
you indicated when you first started searching that the first search was on the bottom, and you indicated at that time you were searching specifically for hands or feet.
Yes, ma'am.
And why did you decide to search the bottom for those types of body parts?
Those types of body parts have less muscular tissue. They're more bony, and they would stay on the bottom for a longer period of time. Whereas something with more muscle tissue, as it decomposes, is going to come up the water column and float.
So, in your experience with the dive team, would the rate of decomposition tell you basically where to look for body parts? Would that factor into kind of how you search?
It definitely factors in how far we search from a given area. If you're told this is where they were last seen, or this is where something was found, the rate of decomposition is going to change how far you go.
And why is that?
As the body comes from the bottom, it's not going to stay neutrally buoyant, but very long. So it would have hit the current slightly, been carried downstream slightly, and then go to the surface.
You indicated that you had detected a sheen on the water. Why was that significant to you?
We collected the pieces from the sheen, and we requested the cadaver dog to check on it, to do a check. The cadaver dog alerted that it was, in fact, a decomposing body, gave us a positive alert. And at that point, we wanted to really focus our search in those areas where the sheen was, because it was coming from somewhere.
And you indicated that you took so the sheen, you actually collected part of the water that had that sheen in it?
Yes, ma'am.
And that's what you had the cadaver dog examine?
Yes, ma'am.
And is that basically what a cadaver dog does? That is alert if there's the presence of a body or decomposing body?
Yes, ma'am.
After the cadaver dog alerted, what did you do at that point? What did you begin doing?
We did not dive air on this particular search. We believed that the parts would be floating at this point. The water temperature was like 89 degrees, which is pretty warm. The body's going to decompose rather fastly in those kind of temperatures. We wear a vulcanized rubber suit. It's a dry suit. It has booties. It's a one-piece suit that you zip up. In theory, it's supposed to keep you dry. Well, it also keeps air. When you zip it up, you store air inside of your suit. Well, that allows you to be positively buoyant in the water, so you don't need a life jacket. It basically is its own homemade life jacket. We use that method to keep us buoyant in the water on the top. We would pull lilies out of the way, and my partner and I moved into and searched extremely methodical and worked our way through lilies.
And you've indicated that process took an hour and a half to 2 hours before you were able to locate
Yes,
the
ma'am.
remains.
Yes, ma'am.
What happened after the hour and a half to 2 hours? What did you locate?
I recovered a body part that I thought was a leg. And
You said you thought it was a leg, later determined that in fact that wasn't the leg?
yes, ma'am. It was later determined to be a head. When I saw the part, I saw a very round bone. Later figured that out to be the neck, but I initially thought it was a femur. It was face down, so all I could see was the smooth. There was no hair on it. It was a smooth back of a head. As we rolled the head over, then you could see that it was in fact a face, and parts of the skin and tissue began to roll off. Or not roll off, peel away.
And you've indicated that when you first came upon this remain, you thought it was the leg, because what you were actually seeing, you later learned, was the neck.
Yes, ma'am.
And so the bone that you were seeing, was that where it had been attached to the rest of the body?
Yes, ma'am. It was very high up. There was actually not a neck. It was higher up on the head, and that's what I saw as the round bone.
And at that point, did you recover the head and remove it from the water?
Yes, ma'am. Because the skin and tissue was starting to roll off, we placed it in a sheet so we didn't lose anything. Marked the area where it was recovered, and we took it to the bank.
In terms of where you got into the water, there was a landing with a mowed down part. Did you go in there, or did you go down further creek?
Initially, we went in there when we did our first search that was on scuba, but for the secondary search, no, we walked down a bank side and worked off the bank's edge there.
After you had recovered the head, did you and the other divers continue to search for further remains?
Yes, ma'am. Once the head was removed from that search pattern, we could still smell a very strong scent and believed there to be more, so we continued our search.
And did that involve the same process in terms of working your way through the water lilies?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you recover another item?
Yes, ma'am.
And what did you recover?
And that was the leg this time.
Where was that leg recovered in relation to where the head was recovered?
In the same general vicinity, I'd have to look at the diagram for the measurements, but within 15, 20 feet of it.
And you indicated that when you went into the water, you had been given information about where the torso had been recovered the day previously?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you undertake to mark in any way the area where you recovered the head and leg?
Yes, ma'am.
And how did you go about doing that?
Because the parts were decomposing and coming apart, we didn't want to leave them in the water to measure them. We wanted to get them out of the water and secure, so we weren't losing anything else. We placed a ribbon in the area on the lilies where they were recovered, and then we measured from points to the ribbon.
And were you working with the Fort Bend Sheriff's Office, and particularly Detective Witchard in that process, or turning over that information to
Yes, ma'am.
Detective Witchard? Did you, the leg, was that a portion of the leg?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you continue to search after that?
Yes, ma'am.
And were you able to recover any additional items?
No, ma'am. We didn't find anything else at that point.
Did you return the following day?
Yes, ma'am.
And what did you do the following day?
The same search pattern. And we actually employed, I believe, 2 more divers and continued that same search technique, and were unsuccessful in finding anything else.
Were you aware that some weeks later, or a week later, that an additional leg portion was found 3/10 of a mile downstream?
I was told that much later. Yes, ma'am.
And that wasn't as a result of any of the efforts of the Houston dive team?
No, ma'am.
when you recovered the head and the portion of the leg. In that area, did the water lilies go almost all the way across the water?
Yes, ma'am. There was a break in the lilies, but I don't know because Richmond Fire had been out there on Sunday. I don't know if they caused that break in the lilies, and originally they were all the way across. But when we got there, it was just a small, narrow channel and a break in the lilies. It was almost all the way across.
And you had testified earlier that the root system with regard to the lilies would go 6 or 7 inches down. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
And so depending on the stage of decomposition, if it was in an earlier stage and there was a current, they would have gone underneath those lilies?
Yes, ma'am.
Potentially?
Potentially. Achieving neutral buoyancy is very difficult. You're either
What do you mean when you say that neutral buoyancy?
to stay even in the water column, just to hover in the water column evenly is very difficult. You're either on the bottom or you're on the top, but you don't stay in the middle very long. So if there's a current coming through there and something comes off the bottom, it's going to get carried down slightly, but it's not going to go very far generally because you don't stay in neutral buoyancy for very long.
And so you would be back on the top?
And when I say on the top, I don't mean that it's popped up on top of everything. It's just as high as it can go because lilies, in this particular instance, roots were on top of it.
And did you note that there was a current there in Oyster Creek?
Yes, ma'am.
And when you were just talking about how difficult it is to maintain the neutral buoyancy, you said, you don't stay on the bottom very long, or you don't stay in the water column very long. You're either on the bottom or coming up to the top. When you say do you also mean that to include somebody's remains or?
Yes, ma'am. What I meant is a body would not stay it's either on the bottom or it's on the top, not necessarily me. I meant the body or body parts.
Now approach the witness.
You are.
I'm handing you, Officer Davis, what's been marked for identification purposes as State's Exhibit A-222 and State's Exhibit A-223. And ask if you recognize those.
Yes, I do.
Turn your attention first to State's Exhibit A-222. What is that?
That's a picture of Oyster Creek from the west bank, pointed back north. That's what it looks like.
And this particular area of Oyster Creek, the flow was to the north. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's the east bank, pointed back north. But yes, the flow was north in this particular area. Oyster Creek actually flows north for a short period of time.
And State's Exhibit A-223.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you recognize that photograph?
Yes, ma'am.
And what's shown in State's Exhibit A-223?
That's a picture of me and my partner on that day. My partner's holding a ribbon, and the ribbon is placed where I recovered the head.
Now, at this time, the state would move to introduce into evidence State's Exhibit A-222 and State's Exhibit A-223.
Let me proceed.
I'd ask permission to publish those on the large screen. They do not depict the body part.
Okay, you may.
Officer Davis, this is State's Exhibit A-222 up on the screen. And do you indicate this is looking from the east bank towards the north?
Yes, ma'am.
And is this the area that you went into the water to begin the search?
Yes, ma'am.
And are you able to see in this photograph the lilies, the vegetation that you described earlier?
Yes, ma'am. Here and here, and it actually crosses down there.
A223. Can you describe what's shown in this photograph?
That's me swimming out of the way of, and I don't know if you can see it right there, there's a ribbon. Mark's holding that ribbon to document where the head was recovered from. As you can see how high those lilies are, we were having to pull each clump of lilies back and go in and look. It wasn't like you could just raise up on top of the water and look down in it. You had to pull them out and put them behind you to search that water.
So this area that we're seeing right here where the pink ribbon is, where you recovered what was later determined to be the victim's head, this is after you moved lilies out and searched in that area for an hour and a half to 2 hours?
Yes, ma'am. You see how they're pushed down right there? We've done that. They weren't. If you go back to the other one, you can see that they're up. We've pushed these lilies down, pulled them out of the way. At times we pulled them behind us. We employed a boat to actually try to dam up the lilies and hold them off of us, but the current was pushing them down on top of us. And at times you wouldn't even be able to see us inside of there.
And using sticks exhibit 223, if we zoom in, are you able to talk about the sheen that you observed on the water and
Yeah, if you see the little white stuff, see the white thing on his suit right there, and then there's sheen, this stuff right here. Well, that's bubbles, but that white stuff that's gathered up against his black suit is the sheen that we were talking about, and it's the same stuff that we collected and later had the cadaver dog.
And again, that's as you see, kind of moving out. You don't see that sheen further out away from
No,
where
ma'am.
you were at that time.
No, ma'am. It's collected up against the lilies, and us as we're inside of there.
And is that sheen produced as a result of the decomposition
Yes.
of the body?
Yes, ma'am. As it comes apart.
Officer Davis, Your Honor, I published 229.
You may.
This is a schematic of that Oyster Creek area, State's Exhibit 229. Do you see that?
Yes, ma'am.
And marked on this are various numbers depicting where certain parts of the victim's body were located. Do you see that?
Yes, ma'am.
And 5 and 6, specifically with regard to 5, is that where you recovered the victim's head?
Yes, ma'am. It is.
And 6, is that where we recovered the portion of her leg?
Yes, ma'am.
And 2 and 3 represent where the torso was found. And does that appear accurate to you in terms of the relative location as it was explained to you?
Yes, ma'am.
And item number 4, which is further back towards the landing area where another portion of the leg was found earlier, does that appear to be accurate in terms of its relation to where you found the head?
Yes, ma'am.
You don't have any further questions at this time?
Any questions?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. Thank you, officer. Thank you very much. It's 5 o'clock. It's probably a good time to stop for the evening. You haven't heard it all. Keep an open mind. Don't form or express any opinion about the guilt or innocence of the defendant or any matter in controversy. Be careful about your conduct. Follow my previous instructions. We'll start at 9:30 in the morning. Thank you very much. Have a good evening. We'll see everybody at 9:30 in the morning. Thank you.